Good evening and welcome everybody. I'm personally really looking forward to tonight's session on potentialization because I've got the chance to interview and to learn from the feet of somebody who's been a friend of mine for a good few years now. We first met, must be 10 years ago, at an Association for Business Psychology meeting. Spent ages outside afterwards chatting and have become friends ever since then, and love Robin's work and everything he's done within it, and really enjoy listening and talking to him. So welcome, Robin. Thank you very much for coming and talking to us on potentialization.
Well, thank you for inviting me along, John. I'm delighted to be here. And
Good.
I must say, I was deeply honoured to have met you because I'd been using John Fisher's change curve for a number of years and talking about it and integrating it into my work. And then I met John Fisher at the Association for Business Psychology, and it wasn't until 48 hours later I realised, crikey, that's the John Fisher. It was not what I expected him to be.
And I have to say, I did get an email from Robin saying, "You didn't tell me you were the John Fisher, am you?" So we started in a great way immediately with some fun humour and everything in it. Before we do talk about what I'm really looking forward to and your more recent thoughts on potential for toxicity within resilience, do you want to just share a little bit about Robin, where you've come from, E for EI for change, and some of the work that's brought you here today, Robin?
Yeah, sure, John. When you and I met, EI for Change was a few years old, and it was going from strength to strength, and I was delivering workshops and training around the Northwest and parts of England. And a lot of my work was involved around EI, emotional intelligence. So it involved things like communication skills, leadership, team working, conflict management, all those sort of good things where people go along for soft skill development. And at the time, resilience was becoming more and more and more popular, and people were talking about resilience in the workplace, and there wasn't really anything to distinguish me and EI for Change from a number of other organizations offering resilience. And you know, it's difficult to come up with a kind of unique selling point, a differentiator, to say, hey, I work in the field of resilience, without feeling as if I'm jumping on a bandwagon. So I got approached by a publishing organization who asked me if I'd considered writing a book, and I hadn't. And through the discussion, I felt here was a nice opportunity to write a book on resilience and to really establish myself as an authority in that sphere. You know, I could go away and get an academic qualification, but what relevance and what pragmatic use is that when I'm delivering training?
Yeah.
So the publisher at the time was looking at a new series of books called The Authority Guide. So I thought, oh, be nice to be included in that. So I worked with the publisher. Oh, lo and behold, there we are. And
Love it. As you know, I am biased totally.
Well, it's got your change curve in there, hasn't
it? Yeah. But full of really pragmatic, useful, and I'm a devout pragmatist, really pragmatic, useful tools, techniques and thoughts within there. So recommended it to loads of people, bought loads of copies and given them to people, etc. So yeah, and carry on, Robin.
Well, the beauty of getting that book published is that it kind of gave me a foothold and a standing within the resilience arena. There it was badged as an authority guide, or there it is badged as an authority guide. It's on Amazon and it's available through good outlets. So I'm actually really, really pleased with the way in which the book has performed. It's not a major international bestseller, not by any stretch of the imagination.
It should be.
Well, you don't write a book for those reasons. You write a book for other reasons, and the reason was really just to spread the message out there about resilience, because I've got some different views on resilience to a lot of people, which have been proven over the years to be quite sound and quite justified. And I'm sure we'll come along to talk about those later. But I'm very, very pleased that with the performance of the book, I've actually converted the book into an online course. So I've taken all of the various chapters and converted them into modules within the course, and each of the sections are then video lessons, and each of the video lessons are 2 to 3 minutes each. I can add into the course questionnaires and quizzes and practical activities, and I must say the online course is available on a number of different platforms and does far better than the book ever will, because there are tens of thousands of learners in hundreds, well, scores of countries taking the course. And I know it's been translated into German, into Indonesian, into various different languages. So, you know, the beauty of it is it's got a life of its own, and off it goes.
Yeah, always with those sorts of things, isn't it? Within that, and I think last count you were almost in 200 different countries, weren't you? And about 250,000 people have actually done
that's right.
your wider scope of courses. So excellent.
So EI for Change has evolved. We still do the face-to-face delivery, and I did a workshop about a week, 10 days ago. Oh, it was wonderful just to get back into the workshop arena. But I think that's underpinned by most of the work now being virtual.
And of course, you've organised conferences on EI as well, as I recall a couple of years ago. Any plans in the future for any more conferences?
I'm going to be very honest with you and the audience here, John. The conference that we ran at Manchester University was 6 years ago.
When was that?
And it was based around neuroscience in the workplace. We had a very good response, but it wasn't as well attended as we would like it to be. Manchester and the Northwest did not get themselves behind the conference, nor did the university. So we were very much on our own, and it did knock EI for Change quite considerably financially. We were able to keep our head above water.
Yeah, good.
And to obviously continue. And I think we have come through this far better because of that than we had done if the conference had been a roaring success. So
a lovely example of resilience there, Robin.
It is. It is. And if we go back, or when we discuss my definition of resilience, you will see that it fits nicely into that. But from here, I'm kind of thinking, do I want the hassle of running another conference? And part of me says, yes, it would be fun, it would be brilliant, it would be great. But I'm still kind of frustrated by the Manchester network. The professional, in inverted commas, network is not professional in terms of what you would define as being professional and what I would define as being professional. They tend to be solicitors, accountants, financiers, and they see themselves as being very professional alongside some of the IT people and the marketing digital companies, and they are very professional, but you know, they don't embrace anything outside of their own sphere of of interest. So
Yeah.
opening them up and saying, hey, we're running a conference on neuroscience, you won't see them for dust.
A total lack of resilience. So I suppose that brings on nicely with your link a moment ago. So how do you define resilience then, Robin?
Well, one of the things that I will say is that a lot of people have very, very different definitions of resilience, and it's not clearly defined. And because of that, when we talk about resilience, what one person thinks about resilience, another will think that they are meaning and talking about the same thing. And to a certain extent, there's a degree of overlap, but to a certain extent, they're not. So I think what we've got to do is to define resilience, and there are some horrible words knocking about, like bounce back ability, where people define resilience that way. Well, resilience is not about bouncing back, because when you bounce back, you're going back to the way things were, and you've survived, but you're actually not allowing for the fact that people have learned, have grown and have evolved through the experience. So a lot of people will then talk about resilience in terms of overcoming adversity. Well, yes, people do overcome adversity, but what is adversity? Because we've all come through a pandemic. Is that adversity? Well, it is to a certain extent, but are you or I any more resilient because we've been through a pandemic? No, we've had our jabs, and that makes us more resilient against the infection, but it doesn't make us any more resilient.
Yeah, yeah. So what about the expression? I think it's Branson uses the expression, it's not about falling down, it's about how you get up within that. So does that getting back up again and almost getting on the horse, does that factor into your definition of resilience?
Well, it does to a certain extent, and I'm reminded of those kind of wobbly toys that we had at when we were at kindergarten, where you push them over and they wobble back up again. And again, we've got to look at this from a toxicity point of view. We are not punch bags. So the trouble is, you can knock somebody off a horse in terms of Richard Branson's definition, and they get back up again, only to get knocked back off the horse again. And I think we've got to watch out for that when we're talking about resilience. And this is where some of the poison and toxicity that we'll talk about comes in.
Yeah, I'm sort of getting the impression that we're looking a little bit around learning and how we learn from whatever's happened and how we take that learning forward into our future interactions with the world.
Yes. So if I go back to your original question, what is my definition of resilience? It's having a capacity to realistically and optimistically understand your current situation, and to have an underpinning value that life is meaningful, and have the creativity, adaptability, and innovation to make the most of your environment, to move yourself and other people around you forward.
I love the positivity in that, and as you know, ever the eternal optimist within there. And I'd just like to pick up on that word optimistically in it, and if you could just unpack that a little bit around why you put optimistically in there.
Well, I think if we look at any kind of situation that we find ourselves in, then we can always find something positive within it. And I think the important thing is we've got to recognize that at times life throws us a curved ball, and we are wading through the quagmire, and life is not all rosy and wonderful, and we can happily skip forward. We just have to put up with stuff. And there are crises and emergencies and adverse events that we all face. And what you have to face, John, and what I know you have faced, is something that I can't comprehend. And what I have to face, you don't understand and you don't comprehend. And we've just kind of got to learn to work through this. I'm reminded of Viktor Frankl, who was in Auschwitz, and he is a far better man than I will ever be. But whilst he was going through these horrific situations that you and I can only ever think negatively about, here was a man who had said to himself, right, I do not like the situation that I find myself in at all. I have everything taken away from me. The only thing that the Nazis cannot take away from me is my freedom to choose. Now, could I do that? And I've got to be honest, John, I don't think I could.
Yeah.
But when we look at what Viktor Frankl did, when he focused very much on a vision, he had an optimistic, realistic view of the situation he found himself in. He underpinned it with this value that life is meaningful. So how could he give his life meaning in those awful situations? And how could he use his creativity and adaptability to come through it? And the way he did it was to focus on a future where he was teaching his students about coming through adversity and the psychology and the search for meaning. And that vision kept him strong, kept him steadfast, and pulled him through, and he survived. And he was very fortunate because, as we know, the killings within those concentration camps could be very random. And he just happened to be in the right place at the right time to ensure that they didn't happen to him.
Yeah, and I think the book has inspired millions since as well to help them through dark times as well, as part and parcel of it. I think, as you know, I'm also a fan of choice and that ability to choose, with the codicil that we then live with our choices and the implications and impact of our choices. And for me, that has that little bit of a knock on into resilience. We make the choice for the best reasons we can use at that time in those circumstances. We then have to live with the outcome of that choice, and that then impacts and affects our future. So I suppose I'd like to touch in now to what I'm sure other people are waiting with bated breath for, and have a look at the poison within resilience. So can you tell me a bit more about what you mean by that, how we can see it and what we can actually do about it?
Yes, it occurred to me many years ago that this word resilience was just scattered into broadcasts on the television like confetti. So you watch the Olympics and somebody falls over and they pick themselves up and they win the race, and they're badged as being resilience. And while we were going through the pandemic, the media was rife with this word resilience all the time, to the point where it got quite nauseous. So I think we've got to watch for this, and I've got to be very, very careful how I express this, but the royal family are forever, when they're talking to the hoi polloi, that's you and me, John, and anybody listening to this.
They don't talk to me. They don't talk to me, Robin.
Through their speeches, they talk and kind of give us the accolade of being resilient, and you think, you have no idea what you're saying, how stupid you sound, and how insulting that is. And I sit there, and I've got to be very careful here because I'm feeling offended for people who really have more right to be offended than I am. And you get the princes standing up in front of the Invicta Games or the Paralympics and talk about disabled people being resilient. And I stand there or I sit there and think they have no idea what it means at all. And to a certain extent, by using the word resilient, it's kind of exonerating them from actually really truly understanding what those people are capable of and what they go through. And quite honestly, I think I have more respect for those people that try their best at those games, do not win, but they have achieved something, and I think they're far more resilient than anybody who's talking about how resilient they are. So that's one aspect of the poison of resilience we've got to watch out for.
Interesting, that one as well, because a couple of things spring to mind there while you were talking about that. It's almost that taking the power out of resilience by its overuse, and the Shakespeare, methinks that doth protest too much type of concept. So we're almost taking the teeth out of it and dismissing it in many ways and making it more of one of those trite, corny type of overused statements, you know, at the end of the day type of statement within it. And linking in a little bit in my mind to that overusing strengths become weaknesses or become counterproductive within it. So I see those links within that. Tell me more, Robin.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. It is this overuse. And there was a governor who worked in one of the Louisianan institutes, political institutes, and she was talking on the 10th anniversary of the cyclone, the Katrina cyclone, and the BP oil spill. And she actually stood up there, and I can't remember a quote, and I apologize for that, or I might be able to find it, but she was saying, let me see if I can find it. It really is a very, very good quote. Here we are. Her name's Tracy Washington of the Louisiana Justice Institute. And what she said is, stop calling me resilient, because every time you say, oh, they're resilient, that means you can do something else to me. I am not resilient. And I think that encapsulates a lot around people who are disadvantaged for whatever reason. And because we're not experiencing that adversity, that disadvantage, we end up then saying, oh, they're resilient. As if it makes them feel better. Oh, I'm resilient, that's all right. I can just carry on the way that I am. And really what we've got to do, it's this badge, this label. What we've really got to do is to get down amongst those people and say, right, how can I put this right? And people are not prepared to do that.
No, and it's easier to say you're resilient so we can wash our hands of it and walk past it, isn't it? That links straight back in again for me into your dislike, and I would agree with the dislike of bounce back ability within there, isn't it? Because it's the same sort of concept. We overuse it. You'll bounce back, don't worry, which totally takes away all of the power and all of the emotional investment within what's happened, and almost says it's okay, forget it, move on. And
and I think we've also got to look at the use of the term in the work environment, because again, it's been bandied around quite a bit, and I'm sure you've been approached, as I have been, John, on a number of occasions. Oh, we'd like to run a workshop on resilience for our middle managers. Oh, would you? Right. Oh, can you do it in half a day? So what do you want the outcome of this to be? Oh, we want our people to be more resilient. No, I can't do that. First of all, we've got to define what it is that you're wanting. You're going to do it for your middle managers so that the senior managers can just turn around and tell them to be more resilient.
Yeah.
And what that does is it exonerates the senior managers by saying, we've got an issue here. As a senior leader, I need to change my behavior, the way in which I'm interacting with people, and try and put things right.
Yeah.
Oh,
let's blame the victim.
Yeah. Oh, you need to be more resilient.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to watch for that.
Well, it reminds me again of that's not a problem. It's a development opportunity. Yeah,
Yes.
right. You just want to do the seagull style of management, and you want me to get used to being kept in the dark and fed on manure.
Yes.
John was worried there. He thought I might use a different word, but he told me.
I think we've got to appreciate that there are times when we really are being hit with the seagulls' excrement quite deliberately. It's coming down.
Yeah.
A continual bombardment. And what we've just got to do, I do not like to be in this particular situation. I wish I wasn't, but this is the reality of the situation. What can I do about it? And we've got to bear in mind that, here we've got to take into consideration that people go through mental health issues. And these are fundamentally something that need to be considered when we are working with people.
Yeah.
It is okay to be not okay.
Totally agree. I love that statement. I think that's so powerful. And yeah, every time I see it, I just think, yeah, I love it within there. And some of the people, what I think so nice, as you know, my ideal sports rugby league, but the amount of work that rugby are putting into mental health and that raising that awareness and just sharing from both codes within it, and some of the top players still in the game and X are coming out and talking about that darker side of being resilient. And maybe I'll throw this one. I've just suddenly had a thought about the English culture, whatever that is, but the stiff upper lip within it, which is a way I'm starting to realize of just camouflaging that resilience concept and that toxicity that we're talking about. Just shut up and put up, stiff upper lip type of thing. So what can we do about it then, Robin?
Well, firstly, I think it's important that we start to recognize the poison, the toxicity there is in resilience. And I did a quick Google search a few days ago when I was preparing to come onto this talk, and I wrote an article and put it up on LinkedIn, and that comes up first on Google. There is not a lot that is written about this. There's not a lot of understanding about it, and that concerns me and that frightens me, because that particular article is not widely distributed and widely read. So why is my little article that is actually raising these questions, which are quite fundamental, deep questions that go to the very fabric of society, not more widely debated and discussed? And that really concerns me. The great thing is mental health is now very much out in the open, and people are more inclined to talk about it, want to talk about it. And I think that's a start.
Definitely.
The stiff upper lip seems to, we are moving well away from that. I think that was very much the thing 50 years ago, or as we were coming out of the Second World War. We're now in the 21st century. So I think that's starting to happen. And I think people are recognizing through the work that's been done around emotional intelligence, that emotions are more than just crying, sobbing, getting angry, getting furious. There are various shades of different emotions, and it's all right to feel a mix of those emotions and work with them and use them.
And I think an ironic positive, if I could dare use that word, of COVID has been, I think that's just brought this a lot more into the forefront as well, that having more empathy, that being more aware of our emotions. And certainly in my personal experience, I've seen a lot more of that emotion being closer to the surface, both in a positive sense as well, with people being a bit more willing to talk, to acknowledge and to accept it. So hopefully this will continue and we're moving in the right direction from there.
It's going to
and
be
I would say to all the listeners, you heard about Robin's article on toxicity and resilience on LinkedIn here. Go grab it, read it, send your questions into potentialization, and maybe there's another session in 6 months or so, Robin, with a questions and answers where we explore the discussion that you've started here from the people who are watching.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the other important things to say about resilience is, well, it's I'm struggling to kind of put it into words, because the whole idea behind resilience is that it came from material science. 50 or 60 years ago, resilience sat within physics, and it was the force, or you were measuring stress over strain when you're putting weights on springs and bits of elastic, and you were then calculating Young's modulus, and that then became a measure of resilience. It then became a metaphor used in the field of human psychology, and to a certain extent it works. But part of the poison of resilience is that when a spring or a piece of elastic has the force taken away from it, it goes back to how it was. And you've got absolutely no idea whether it's been subjected to any force or not.
I think also sometimes it goes back in if I think of an elastic band, it stretches a bit more, so becomes a bit weaker, ironically, and by taking it too far, that resilience, you actually weaken and damage that core inner strength.
That's right, and I think the metaphor starts to break down when we then start to move into what's known as necking, or that overstretch, where the material doesn't actually go back to how it was, and as you say, the resilience is weakened. Now, to kind of build upon a dodgy metaphor here, what happens in terms of human psychology is that people go into the depths of despair and into depression, and in those sort of circumstances they need some kind of medical intervention, some kind of professional support. No, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It means that the biochemistry of their brain has been altered, and it just needs a bit of a kick in the right direction. So getting the right level of support in that way, is that not being resilient? A lot of people would say, well, you're not being resilient, but you're actually being very resilient, because you're going along to a specialist, your general practitioner, who may ask you to go to a psychiatrist, who is then actually working with the biochemistry of your brain to get it back to working and functioning in a capacity which everybody else would describe as normal. So you actually are being very resilient rather than having no resilience.
Totally agree. And because you're having to deal potentially with people and some stigma that's still in some areas associated, you're showing an even increased degree of capacity and capability because you're prepared to do that. And I think the link is with that lovely word optimistically, that you put
Yes.
into your definition, because we go there expecting it to be better, expecting us to get stronger, better, whatever words we want to use, more able to cope, more comfortable with ambiguity and more comfortable with being uncomfortable. So
Yes.
what is the right direction to kick it in then, Robin?
To have an understanding of yourself and to know that it is okay not to be okay. To recognize that we all have this self-talk. You've got the little devil and the angel sitting on your corner, one saying do it and the other one saying don't be so stupid. Oh, what did you say that for, Robin? Oh, you stupid idiot, Robin. People will think you're absolutely useless, Robin. Well,
Yeah.
you've got the same voice, but it doesn't use the word Robin. It probably uses the word John.
When
So
it's been kind, it uses the word John. It uses all the negatives. Yeah,
yeah,
within.
yeah,
And I'm reminded, of course, there's the chimp paradox, which we're
yes,
fringing on, and the box metaphor within there around that, which I love, the box metaphor of beating ourselves up in a cold, dark place
yes.
within it.
And all of this drives our thinking and our feelings. So what we need to do is to recognize that our feelings are driving our thinking and our thinking are driving our feelings, and thereby sits emotional intelligence. But what people will see of that are our actions and our behaviors and the way in which we respond to circumstances. So how do we get ourselves into a place where we feel that we are in control? And again, I go back to the thoughts of Viktor Frankl. What choices have you got here? It might be a Hobson's choice. You might not like any of the choices that you've got, but which is
Yeah,
the best of a bad bunch?
yeah, yeah, the least painful alternative. Yeah, I've made that choice occasionally,
Yeah,
often.
and you could look back with a degree of hindsight and say, perhaps it wasn't the best choice, but you can't do anything about it. You made the choice back then, so
Totally.
stick with it.
Yeah, very much so. And it's one of those that, as you know, I come from a constructivist perspective, and that says that we make the best choice with the information we have available within it. It's then about how that impacts on our future choices and what we do in the future to make a more effective choice with more and different information. So it's around that balance in many ways. For me personally, and I think that links in a little bit with how I'm interpreting some of the things that you're saying about finding the right balance with being optimistic, with getting the support, with being accepting and increasing our emotional intelligence.
And also, I think the other important point here is that in order to be more resilient, you need to get connected with a good network of people who are there to support you
Yeah.
emotionally and are there for you. And I think the other important aspect that we need to draw out is an ability to be able to empathize with people and to try and understand things from their perspective, and that will help in terms of understanding their level of resilience without actually then putting a label on them.
Yes, definitely. It's the label that that can destroy.
It
So,
is.
what's sort of your top tips then for just practicing strengthening our empathy muscle?
Well, I think the important thing is to, again, we're covering a lot of very, very good quality basics around engaging with people at a deep psychological and emotional intelligence level. What you do is you use coaching techniques and just ask them, how are you feeling at the moment? What is it that you're how are you seeing things at the moment? Help me to understand what's going on. What support can I give you? How can I help? It's not necessarily about me at all. It's about you. So
Yeah.
what can I give? And I think a lot of people find that very hard to do. And I've got
Yeah.
to admit, John, I find it hard at times.
As you know, I do at times as well within that. And I love the way you phrased that a moment ago, help me understand. And I think that's a really positive way of taking the negative emotion out of it, because you're not saying you have done wrong. You weren't communicating clearly. You're saying, help me understand. I don't understand. And it's that ownership that I think then helps develop in a more positive way.
Yeah, and I think it then brings in another toxic, poisonous aspect of resilience. This concept. If we go back to our metaphor and what we've been talking about in terms of resilience, we've talked about too little resilience. What about too much resilience? And what does that look like? Well, I think it can be summed up in one word: Trump. And there you are. You've got somebody who, it doesn't matter what is happening in the world, he's kind of got his own agenda, won't listen to what anybody else has to say, does not understand anybody else's perspective, and just carries on treading on people's heads until he gets to the top. And you know, here is a man who utilizes and manipulates emotional intelligence because he knows how to emotionally engage with people.
Very
and
clever.
I must say, his emotional intelligence in that direction is second to none. And I can use another word of somebody who has got that manipulation and that capability. And again, I can sum it up with one word: Hitler. Again, another great advocate for pitching into the emotional climate of the populace and being able to work with it and get people to do that individual's bidding. And we can look at other examples throughout history: Pol Pot, Stalin. They've all got this amazing ability, and within that there is just too much resilience. So we've just got to watch for the poison that could spill over when we are looking at engaging with people in the wrong way.
And you're almost linking into a couple of things for me around the narcissistic personality, as well as the snakes in the boardroom concept within it, and that riding roughshod to achieve what I want to achieve. And your goals don't matter as much as my goals, and I'll do what I want to do to achieve them.
And in order for you to work with me, you need to be more resilient.
My way or the highway. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen.
Oh, we still hear that from time to time being bandied around, and it concerns me. But yeah, you know, these are people who have had a lot of success over the years. They've done very, very, very well. And to a certain extent, people try to emulate that success by utilizing the behaviors that got them to where they are. And I think, unfortunately, we still get a lot of organizations and a lot of societies which fall around putting those people on a pedestal and saying that's the way to be.
Yeah, success breeds success. And we do it ourselves. I've certainly talked in my coaching practice about who do you know who does whatever it is you want to improve, who does it well, and model them. What do they do? How do they do it? So at varying levels, we almost encourage that and that perpetuation of that overemphasis on resilience, and that overusing resilience as a way of helping people. Interesting. I'll have to reflect on that a little bit.
Well, I'm kind of reminded of a little girl who, at the end of last year, was inspired by Kamala Harris getting into the White House as the vice president. And she was saying, that's where I want to be. And so you then ask the question, well, who do you admire in terms of getting to where they wanted to be? And can you replicate those behaviors? And I'm afraid what we're seeing within the politicians, not only in the US, but all over the world, is this tendency to say what it is that you want to say at the time, because that's what people want to hear.
Yeah.
And then turning around a few weeks later and changing your message because people want to hear a slightly different message. And they don't like being labeled as a liar, but unfortunately there are mixed messages in what they're saying, and there's miscommunication in the messages that they're putting across.
And I suppose linking back in, that's a nice example of how their inbuilt high resilience tolerance allows them to interpret messages and not see the irony or not the U-turns that make them less aware and less emotionally intelligent while acting in a pseudo-emotional intelligent way.
I can't imagine how they can do it, where they are sitting there in an interview and a clip's being played of something that they've said 6 months ago, which is in complete contrast to what they're saying now, and they just do not see and link the two together. And I just don't know how they do it. They've got too much resilience.
We're almost back at the start of the conversation here, aren't we, where we talked about we can't put ourselves in other people's shoes, and you know some of the things I've been through and vice versa, and while we can have that empathy, we can't quite understand, and that then has that implication for that, again, back to what does resilience actually mean as part and parcel of it. And maybe there's something in your definition there around a shared understanding, helping develop a shared resilience in a healthy way, as opposed to an unhealthy way that just makes us all Teflon and nothing sticks as part of it.
Yes, and I think it's part of it is having a shared vision and being able to work towards that vision, but it needs to be clearly defined. And it needs to have sufficient wiggle room within it. And then it's having the ability to be flexible and adaptable, not in the political sense, so that you're so flexible and adaptable, you'll say whatever people want to hear. But having the flexibility and the adaptability to be able to work around circumstances as they do change. And then having a level of proactivity, right? In order for this to happen, I need to be doing this, and this. So let's kick out all the stuff that don't necessarily need to do, and let's focus on the important things. And, you know, there's a job coming up that I really don't like doing, but I've got to do it, so I might as well get on with it.
Yeah.
So do that. And then I go back to what I've said all along, just make sure that you've got your networks in place and you've got the people there to support you emotionally, and the people who you can bounce ideas off of and who you can go along and talk to when you are, I won't say struggling, but you're in need of empathy. You just need somebody to talk to, have a good cathartic moan to.
Definitely. We've both been there with each other on that one. One of my favourite sayings that I think is what we're talking about a little bit with that last bit. When you're up to your backside in alligators, it's hard to remember that the original intention was to drain the swamp. And sometimes we just need a bit of help getting that refocus or getting the planks down that we can walk above the alligators on to help us make the best, most effective choices that we can make in a healthy, optimistic, positive way.
And this might not be a politically correct statement, but those alligators make some lovely luggage.
And shoes.
And shoes, yes.
Within it. I suppose before I just ask if we've got any questions and bring Sue and John in around there, do you want to just share your definition again of what resilience is? Because I think that's a really lovely way to end this formal part of it, to see what questions we've got, Robin.
Yes, it's really in three parts. It's having the ability to realistically and optimistically accept the situation that you find yourself in currently. You might not like it, but that's the reality of it. So underpin that with a deep set of values that life is meaningful, and have the adaptability and creativity to make the best of the circumstances, no matter how tough or how hard you find them. You will learn through it, you will pull through, and as long as you are able to survive coming through that, then you're resilient.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Robin. And thank you. Loved the session. Fascinating. And challenged me as well with some of my thoughts around on there that to go away and reflect on. I noticed John's just shared on chat. Do you want to just tell us a bit more about that then, John, and why that's been one of the key takeaways for you?
Yes, I didn't mean to press enter. That's half a sentence. It was the beginning of a question.
Excellent. Well, finish the question off then.
But what I wonder is, as wonderful as it is, it's okay to be not to be okay. I can't even say that properly, but you know what I'm trying to say.
It's okay to be not okay.
All night, haven't I?
Yes. But, which is great because it's as a message to the individuals. But of course, in the same situation where you've got staff, you could say, well, it's all right if my staff are not okay. And it becomes in exactly the same way as it's okay, my staff are resilient, they can cope with it. It could. So I think you've already been saying it. What we need is the wisdom across the whole organisation, isn't it? And it's an evolving thing, and that we can't just use these things as phrases. That are nice. We've got to do the real work.
Very much so. And I like the question while Robin's thinking about how he's going to answer it. I like it in one way because it links back into what we talked about by giving these things a label, we take away the importance and the power. So by labeling everybody and saying it's okay, the whole company can not be okay, we're almost giving people permission to act badly and to justify it by it's okay not to be okay. Robin, your thoughts?
I think we've got to be very, very careful with this statement, as John and you have just highlighted, or both Johns. It is okay to not be okay, but that's not an excuse for a poor performance. And I think what we've got to do, and this is where good leadership comes in, is to be able to get the balance right by saying, right, I can give you this support up to this particular point. And this sounds very harsh and very hard. And it's also very easy to say in this sort of situation, but very difficult to do. When it gets to this point and we go beyond this point, then this is what I need to see in terms of your performance. Now, if you're not capable of doing that, you need to let me know as soon as you possibly can in order that we can make provision around that. So I think the important thing is to put the right level of support in. It's getting the balance right, and that is incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard. But I think the worst thing is, as John was saying, people might then hide behind it. No, that's not acceptable. Any more than be more resilient as a statement from a leader is not acceptable.
Yeah, I remember a company I used to work for launched a scheme about leadership management development and process, and did a massive really good training courses development and engaged loads of people around changing the company culture. But they started using I know it's not best practice, but I think you're an idiot. And it became that they almost excused the inappropriate behavior by saying that this is inappropriate, but I'm still going to say it within there. And it sort of undermined a lot of the good work they were doing in other areas. And it just became that excuse. Are there any other questions that we've got for Robin?
Can I just follow on a little bit? Because that
Of course you can.
Really does remind me about one of my favorite themes, even though not because it's a good theme, that the nature of work is changing a lot at the moment. It's going to get worse. So as companies change, it might be people that had jobs there and were doing well, it's no longer appropriate. Or so as a wider society, we need to support people through change, moving to different jobs. And I think the work you're doing, Robin, is really important in that respect.
So do I.
Oh, thank you. And it really is helping the individual. It's back to the whole theme of this evening, helping the individual to understand that they have choice and to make the best choices that they need to make for themselves. Yeah,
organisations don't change, individuals do. And that's been my mantra for a long time. I've never seen an organisation change. I've seen lots of individuals change that's changed the organisation, but without individuals changing, it doesn't happen. And I think it was John Harvey Jones said, we change organisations one person at a time. So, well, thank you very much, Robin. I'm sure all of the audience, everybody who's watching this on catch up, as well as live, have been as fascinated as I've been and as intrigued by it and as stimulated by it. And I can't wait to discuss this more with you over a cup of coffee.
That would be great. And of course,
definitely.
we can then raise the cup to our resilience when we have our coffee together.
Definitely, and we can bounce back. So, thank you very much, Robin. On behalf of Potentialisation, it's been a pleasure and an honour
and the pleasure's been
to hear
mine,
your
John.
thoughts.
Thank you.